introduce yourself to some of the people that don't know who you are?
All right. I'm Carolyn Petersen, and right now I'm a science writer. I studied astronomy at the University of Colorado, and I do documentary films for science centers and planetariums. And I come here to Starfest to talk about astronomy every year.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember what experience first got you interested in science?
Yeah, I do, actually. It was my dad. And we were out looking at the sky, and I had heard about a launch of a probe called Sputnik, which was a long time ago. It was in the late 1950s. And I was barely 4 years old at the time, and I said, I have to see Sputnik. And he said, okay, I'll take you out and show you. Now, Sputnik was only this big around, so there's no way you could see it from ground. But he said, okay, you see that thing moving up there? That's Sputnik. And I was completely happy. But it got me totally focused on the stars after that.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
What's your favorite thing in space?
My favorite thing in space? Well, right now it's Hubble Space Telescope. So when I was in graduate school, I started out studying the planet Mars. And then when you go to graduate school, you get a boss that says, okay, I have money to study something, I'm going to pay you to study it for me. And my boss said, you're going to study comets, and you're going to work on Hubble Space Telescope. So I got to work on studying about 5 or 6 comets, and then when the Hubble Space Telescope launched in 1990, which is 25 years ago, I was one of the first students to be able to work on a team to be able to look at what was coming down from Hubble Space Telescope. So that's my favorite satellite. My favorite planet is still Mars, although Pluto is pretty close.
Yeah. My birthday is actually 2 days. Is 2 days before. Is 2 days before New Horizon gets that really big cool stuff, which is really cool.
The flyby, yeah.
Yeah. I'm really interested in girls in STEM, so I want to know what it's been like for you. Have you had trouble being a woman in a STEM environment?
Yes and no. When I went into science when I was much younger, when I studied as an undergraduate, so my first degree, I was told that it would really be much easier if I became a teacher. And I just said, no, I want to study science. And I did become a teacher, but I studied a lot of science as well. Then when I decided a few years later to go back to graduate school, they were more welcoming of it. There were still some difficulties for women in it, but I didn't really face any. What I face now is that there are a lot of science writers out there, and it seems like the male science writers get more attention than female ones do. And I don't know how true that is. I'm actually going to research that a little bit to see if that's really true, or is it just my perception.
So we know Emily Grassley from the Brain Scoop, and she's the chief curiosity correspondent at the Field Museum in Chicago, and she drives interest in like the mammal stuff in the museum. So would you consider yourself the same thing but with space?
Yes, I do, because I now write online. I have a blog that I do called The Space Writer's Ramblings, and I write about that every day, about science, some aspect of science. I also write for a group of people called About.com, and I have my own space there called space.about.com. And they told me, you write about whatever it is, as long as it's space and astronomy, that's what we want. So I look at it, I think she also looks at it like she's curating, she's collecting interesting things to tell you about science. What I do is I go out and look at the most interesting stories every day or every few days that are coming out in space and about astronomy, and I try to write those for people out in the world who don't have the same access I do to some of that information.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I'll probably go check those things out now. Do you think we are lacking in science education, or we are doing it wrong?
I think we need more science education, and I think we need to emphasize it more so than we are. Right now, I don't think we're teaching it quite right.
Yeah.
That's my opinion of it.
I think that, from what I know, I've been homeschooled my entire life, but from what I know, they kind of more show the experiments to the kids and let them do a lot of it, so I would hope that they start letting the kids do more of the experiments.
There is actually a movement towards that. It's more of a hands-on experiment. However, one thing about science is, while there is hands-on work, there's also that time when you sit back at the computer and you've got to think. So it's more passive, it's more quiet. And one of the things I try to tell people is you don't always have the white lab coat on and you're not always doing science. Sometimes you're thinking about it. Like, why is my experiment going this way? Or should I do this? Or should I try coding that? So it's a little of both.
Do you think there's life in space?
Yeah, I do. I just don't know where it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I've heard that there's planets that at least could have had life, except light years goes in and stuff like that. But it could it at least used to be able to host life on it. So who knows what we could find in those places.
Well, I'm actually confident that we will find either traces of life or maybe there's some kind of microbial life on Mars. But also the little moon of Jupiter called Europa has got conditions that could support life. It doesn't mean it's there, but there are conditions there that we think could support life if it plays out the way we think it does. So we're still kind of waiting to learn about that.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm really interested in space and stuff like that. So it's really nice. I'm about halfway through your book and I'm really loving it.
Oh,
and
thank you.
There's these really interesting facts. Like I learned that Venus is really bright because of like the clouds and they reflect the light and stuff. That was really interesting. I had no idea about that and it was really, really cool. And it's just, and you also like in the intro, like in the opening of your book, it said that everything we come from comes from space and even the Big Bang. And it's just so cool to think about that stuff.
You know, when I was first going to school, when I was about your age, we didn't know anything about any of that. So, for example, in that time, which was in the early 1960s, things like black holes were theoretical. That we just had an idea that we had the math to be able to tell that they could exist. And now, all these years later, Hubble Space Telescope has found I don't know how many evidence of black holes, you know, in stars and in the middle of galaxies and that sort of thing. So science changes. That's a good thing about science, is it changes. And we now know we can go all the way back to the Big Bang and trace elements back and see what we did, where we came from.
Yeah, it's just so amazing.
Cool.
Thanks for taking a couple minutes to sit down and talk to me.
Sure, thank you.
It's time to press the subscribe button. Subscribe button. Subscribe button. Subscribe. Bye 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 bye.